Hello, everyone. Have you ever started learning English with strong motivation but slowly lost it over time? At first, everything feels exciting. You want to learn. You want to improve. You make a plan. You decide to study every day. But after a few days, something begins to change. You feel tired. You feel distracted. And one day, you stop. Not because you wanted to stop, but because it became difficult to continue. Maybe this has happened to you before. You start again. You feel motivated again, but the same pattern repeats. You begin. You try. And then you stop. And after some time, you begin to wonder something. Why is it so hard to stay consistent? Why can I start but not continue? Many people believe the answer is simple. They think they need more discipline. They think they need stronger motivation. So they try to push themselves harder. They try to study longer. They try to force themselves to continue. But this often creates stress, and stress makes it even harder to continue. Because motivation is not stable. It changes. Some days you feel strong. Some days you feel tired. And when your learning depends only on motivation, it becomes unstable. This is why many people struggle to continue learning English. They rely on feeling. But feeling changes. So what is the solution? The answer is habit. Habit does not depend on motivation. Habit depends on routine. It is something you do without thinking too much. Think about something simple in your life, something you do every day. You do not ask yourself if you feel like doing it. You just do it. This is what habit looks like. And this is what we need in language learning. Because learning a language is not a short process. It takes time. It requires repetition. It requires consistency. And consistency comes from habit, not from motivation. But how do we build a habit? This is where many people feel confused. They think habit means doing something big. They think they need to study for hours every day. But this is not how habit works. Habit begins with something small, something simple, something easy to continue. If something feels too difficult, your brain will resist it. But if something feels easy, your brain will accept it. This is why small actions are powerful. Listening for a few minutes, reading a short sentence, even thinking one simple thought in English. These small actions may seem unimportant, but they create consistency, and consistency creates habit. Another important idea is reducing resistance. If your learning feels heavy, you will avoid it. If it feels simple, you will return to it. So instead of asking, "How can I study more?" you can ask, "How can I make this easier?" This small change can create a big difference. Because when something feels easy, you are more likely to continue. And continuation is the key to improvement. Another important factor is environment. Your environment affects your behavior. If English is always far away from your daily life, it becomes easy to forget. But if English is part of your environment, it becomes easier to stay connected. You can listen while walking. You can hear English in quiet moments. You can create small spaces where English exists naturally. This helps your brain become familiar with the language. And familiarity makes learning easier. At this point, you may begin to see something clearly. The problem is not your ability. The problem is not your motivation. The problem is the system. And when you change the system, everything begins to change. Because habit is not about forcing yourself. It is about designing your learning. in a way that your brain can accept. And when your brain accepts it, you continue. And when you continue, you improve. But there is still something important we need to understand. How do we turn small actions into a lasting habit? How do we continue even when we do not feel motivated? And this is where the story begins to go deeper. From starting to continuing. Now that we understand why habit is important, we can begin to explore how to build it step by step in a realistic way. The goal is not to create a perfect routine. The goal is to create something you can continue without stress. The first step is to make your habit very small. Many learners try to start with big goals. They decide to study for 1 hour every day. At first, this feels possible. But after a few days, it becomes difficult because the brain sees it as a heavy task. And when something feels heavy, the brain begins to resist. So instead of starting big, start small, very small. Even 5 minutes is enough. Listening to one short audio, reading one simple sentence. These actions are easy to start. And when something is easy to start, it is easier to continue. The second step is to connect your habit to something you already do. This is called habit linking. You take something that is already part of your daily life and you add English to it. For example, you can listen to English while you walk. You can listen while you drink coffee. You do not need to create a new time. You use time that already exists. This makes the habit easier to maintain. The third step is to remove obstacles. If something makes your habit difficult, your brain will avoid it. So make your learning environment simple. Prepare your audio in advance. Keep your materials ready. Reduce the steps you need to begin. Because the easier it is to start, the more likely you are to continue. The fourth step is to focus on consistency, not intensity. Many learners try to do a lot in one day, but then they feel tired, and the next day they stop. This pattern breaks habit. Instead, focus on doing a small amount every day. Consistency builds momentum, and momentum makes habits stronger. The fifth step is to track your habit. When you see your progress, you feel motivated. You can use a simple method. Mark each day you practice. Even a small mark is enough. Over time, you will see a chain of consistency, and this chain becomes something you do not want to break. The sixth step is to accept imperfect days. There will be days when you feel tired. There will be days when you do not want to study. This is normal. Do not expect yourself to be perfect. On difficult days, do something very small. Even 1 minute is enough, because the goal is not perfect learning. The goal is to keep the habit alive. The seventh step is to make your habit enjoyable. If something feels boring, you will stop. But if something feels interesting, you will continue. Choose content that you like. Stories, simple conversations, topics that interest you. When you enjoy the process, your brain becomes more engaged. And when your brain is engaged, learning becomes easier. The eighth step is to remind yourself why you started. Sometimes you may forget your reason. You may lose direction. So take a moment to remember. Why do you want to learn English? Is it for communication? Is it for growth? Is it for new opportunities? When you remember your reason, you regain focus. And focus helps you continue. Another important idea is patience. Habit does not form in one day. It grows slowly, through repetition, through consistency. At first, it may feel difficult. You may need to remind yourself. But over time, something begins to change. Your habit becomes automatic. You no longer need to force yourself. You simply do it. And this is the moment when learning becomes part of your life. Not something extra, but something natural. At this point, you may begin to notice something interesting. You are improving without trying too hard. You are learning without stress. And this is the power of habit. But there is still one important part left. How do we continue this habit for a long time? How do we make it a permanent part of our life? And this is where the story moves forward. From building a habit to living with it. So now we come to the final part of this story. How can you keep your English habit for a long time without losing it again? Because starting is not the hardest part. Continuing is. Many people can begin. They feel motivated. They feel ready. But after some time, they slowly stop. And this happens again and again. So the real question is not, how do I start? The real question is, how do I continue? The answer is not about strong motivation. It is about making your habit part of your identity. When something becomes part of who you are, you do it naturally, without thinking too much. For example, you do not think about brushing your teeth. You just do it, because it is part of your life. This is the level we want to reach with English. Not something you have to do, but something you naturally do. To reach this point, we need to make English feel normal. Not special, not difficult, just part of your daily routine. Another important idea is reducing expectations. Many learners expect big results. They want fast improvement. They want to feel progress quickly. But when expectations are too high, disappointment comes easily, and disappointment breaks habit. So instead of expecting big results, focus on small progress, small steps, small changes, because small progress is stable, and stability creates long-term habit. Another key idea is forgiving yourself. There will be days when you miss your habit. There will be days when you forget. This is normal. Do not judge yourself. Do not feel guilty. Instead, return to your habit the next day. This is very important. Habit is not about being perfect. It is about returning. Every time you return, you make your habit stronger. Another important part is creating emotional connection. If English feels like a task, you will eventually avoid it. But if it feels meaningful, you will continue. So try to connect English to something you care about, something you enjoy. Music, stories, ideas. When English becomes connected to your interests, it becomes part of your life. And when it becomes part of your life, it becomes easier to continue. Another important idea is simplifying your system. If your learning process is too complex, you will lose it. Too many materials, too many plans. This creates confusion. So keep your system simple. One main activity, one main focus, something you can repeat every day. Simplicity creates consistency, and consistency creates habit. Another key idea is noticing your progress. Sometimes progress is very small. You may not notice it easily, but it is there. You understand a little more. You feel a little more comfortable. These small changes matter. When you notice them, you feel encouraged, and encouragement helps you continue. Another important part is protecting your habit. Life can be busy. There will be distractions. There will be interruptions. So it is important to protect your time, even a few minutes, even a small space in your day. Because if you protect your habit, Your habit will support you. Over time, something begins to change. You no longer think about starting. You simply continue. English becomes part of your daily rhythm, part of your routine, part of your life. And when this happens, learning becomes effortless. Not because it is easy, but because it is consistent. And consistency creates growth. So if you remember one thing from this story, remember this. Do not try to do more. Try to continue. Do something small. Do it every day. Return when you stop. And slowly your habit will grow stronger. And when your habit becomes strong, your English will grow with it. Thank you for spending this time with the story. And as always, see you in the next story.